Let me ask you something uncomfortable. You've probably heard of the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, families that didn't just build wealth, they kept it, across wars, across market crashes, across 3, 4, 5 generations and beyond. Now here's what nobody wants to say out loud. It wasn't the money that kept them rich. Think about that for a second. Because if it were just the money, every lottery winner, every overnight tech millionaire, every athlete with a 9-figure contract would still be rich right now. Most of them aren't. The Vanderbilts burned through one of the greatest fortunes in American history in less than 2 generations. By the time their family held a reunion in the 1970s, not a single millionaire sat in the room. Cornelius Vanderbilt had been one of the richest men who ever lived. So if money doesn't keep you rich, what does? The answer is something that old money families have quietly passed down for centuries, something that isn't taught in schools, isn't covered in personal finance books, and honestly, isn't something they're rushing to share with the rest of us. It's not a strategy. It's not a secret investment. It's a complete operating system for how you see money, time, risk, and legacy programmed into their children from birth. Today on Old Money Every Day, we're pulling it apart. Every pillar, every framework. And at the end, I'm going to show you exactly how to start installing this operating system in your own life. No trust fund required. Stay with me. This one is going to change how you think about wealth for the rest of your life. Pillar 1, the time horizon. They don't think in years, they think in centuries. The very first and most foundational difference between old money thinking and everyone else is this: time horizon. Most people, and I mean the overwhelming majority, think about money in short windows. Monthly bills, annual salary, maybe a 5-year savings goal if you're really disciplined. That's not a personal failure. That's how the system we grew up in was designed to work. Paycheck cycles, annual performance reviews. Consumer culture is built entirely around this month, this season, this year. Old money families operate on a completely different time axis. When a Rockefeller patriarch made a capital decision, he wasn't asking what's the return this year. He was asking where will this be in 40 years. When old European aristocratic families placed wealth somewhere, the question wasn't the next quarter. It was the next century. And this isn't philosophy. It has devastating practical consequences. Here's the math. $1 invested at a 10% annual return becomes roughly $259 in 10 years. But leave that same dollar at the same rate for 60 years. It becomes over $34,000. Same dollar, same rate. The only variable is time. Old money families have been letting capital compound without interruption for generations. The rest of us keep breaking the curve. We spend the principal. We cash out too early. We restart from zero every single time. John D. Rockefeller established a family trust in the early 20th century with one explicit instruction to his heirs: never touch the principal, ever. Only distribute the earnings. That trust still exists today. Over a century of uninterrupted compounding on the same original capital. Here's the mental frame you need to absorb from this section. Every financial decision you make today is an act of planting trees whose shade you may never sit under. But your children will. That is the operating system. That is the first program old money installs. Your takeaway: make at least one financial decision per year on a 25-year time horizon. 1. A retirement contribution, a small land purchase, a policy for your children. It doesn't have to be huge, it just has to be long. Pillar 2, assets over income. They don't chase money. They build things that make money. Here's the question that separates old money thinking from everything we were raised to believe. Middle-class culture programs you to ask, how do I earn more? Old money asks, what do I own? And the difference between those two questions is the difference between building a career and building a dynasty. Income stops the second you stop working. Injury, illness, burnout, a market shift, and the money stops flowing. But assets keep generating income whether you're working, sleeping, sick, or sitting on a beach in the Algarve. Let me give you the math on this. Imagine 2 people. Person A is a doctor earning $300,000 a year, impressive by any measure. Person B owns a property portfolio worth $3 million, generating $180,000 annually in passive income. On the surface, Person A earns more, but Person A's wealth creation stops the moment they stop. Person B's $3 million asset base is also appreciating. 20 years from now, that portfolio could be worth $9 million, generating over $500,000 a year. Person A has a retirement account. Person B has built a dynasty. The Astor family built their initial fortune in fur trading. What kept them wealthy across generations was Manhattan real estate. At their peak, they owned an estimated 1/15 of all real estate in New York City. Not stocks that could be sold in a panic, physical land in the most valuable city in the Western world. Here's something subtle that reveals the old money mindset perfectly. You will rarely see a truly old money family driving the newest luxury car or wearing logo-covered designer clothing. That's new money. That's the desire to show wealth because deep down there's still insecurity about whether it will last. Old money has nothing to prove. Their wealth isn't in the car. It's in the asset column. Every dollar spent on a luxury item that depreciates is a dollar that isn't compounding. They don't ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? They ask, what do you want to own? Your takeaway: stop asking how to earn more. Start asking how to own more. A rental property, a dividend portfolio, a stake in a small business. The vehicle matters less than the mental shift from income chasing to asset building. Pillar 3. Education as a power system. They don't educate their children to get jobs. They educate them to own the world. This next section is going to make some people uncomfortable, but stay with me. Old money families do not revere formal education the way the middle class does. Not because they don't value knowledge, they value it more deeply than anyone, but because they understand a critical distinction that changes everything. Middle-class education is a certification system. Old money education is a power system. The middle class earns degrees to signal to employers that they're qualified to work for someone else. The entire framework is engineered to make you a better, more valuable employee. Old money educates their children to understand how the world actually works, how money flows, how legal systems operate, how to negotiate, how to read people, how to build and maintain networks of power, not to get a job, to own, control, and expand inherited influence. Think about this. In many old money households, children are exposed to legal and financial concepts from a very young age, not in a textbook way, but in a dinner table conversation way. A father running a family business talks to his 12-year-old about why they structured a deal a certain way. A grandmother managing the family trust explains what fiduciary duty means. These conversations happen naturally, constantly, because the children are immersed in adults who live this language every day. They also have a completely different relationship with failure. Because their financial survival doesn't depend on any single endeavor, they can afford to let their children fail in controlled environments and learn. Middle-class parents, terrified that a mistake could mean real hardship, tend to overprotect. Old money parents say, "You lost the money. Good. What did you learn?" The lesson is worth more than the capital lost. Your takeaway: start having money conversations at your dinner table. Read books on financial systems and economic history, not just tips. Learn the basics of trusts, LLCs, and contracts. And teach your children the language of ownership, not just the mechanics of saving. Quick pause, because we're almost halfway through and the next 3 sections are honestly where things get really interesting. If this kind of content is what you're here for, the deep dives into how generational wealth actually works, hit subscribe and drop a like right now. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps this channel go deeper on exactly this kind of content. Tell me below which section is hitting hardest for you so far. Alright, let's keep going. Pillar 4. Network as net worth. Their relationships are not social, they are structural. You've heard it 1,000 times, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And every time you hear it, it sounds a little cynical, like an excuse for nepotism. But when you understand how old money actually operates, you realize that phrase barely scratches the surface. Old money families don't just have networks. They have ecosystems, multi-generational, carefully cultivated webs of relationships that span industries, governments, financial institutions, and geographies, built and maintained over decades as a deliberate wealth strategy. When an old money family sends their child to a prestigious boarding school, they are not primarily paying for education. They are paying for the relationships their child will form. The person sitting next to your son at school today might be running a major financial institution or a government ministry in 30 years. And when that moment comes, your son won't be making a cold call. He'll be calling someone he shared a dormitory with. That's not nepotism. That's strategic relationship infrastructure built decades in advance. But it goes deeper than school connections. Old money maintains their networks through what you might call social rituals of reciprocity, country clubs, private societies, charitable foundations, annual gatherings. These aren't leisure activities. They are infrastructure. Every handshake at a charity gala is a maintenance touch point on a relationship that may have been started by the previous generation. Every favor given is a credit in a ledger that will be called in somewhere down the line. Social capital, the value embedded in relationships, is as real and as manageable to old money families as financial capital. And just like financial capital, it must be invested, maintained, and protected. There's also something critically important about the quality of advisors in the old money world. They don't use a general financial advisor from a chain firm. They have private wealth managers who have worked with their family for decades, family lawyers who know every trust, every asset, every legal structure, accountants who understand the full complexity of their wealth picture. And often, these advisors are multi-generational themselves. The current wealth manager may be the son of the advisor who served the grandfather. That continuity of expert counsel is a competitive advantage most people never even consider. Your takeaway: you don't need to go to Eton to build a powerful network, but you do need to be intentional. Join organizations where ambitious, successful people gather. Give value before you ask for anything. Maintain relationships consistently, not just when you need something. Begin treating your professional relationships as long-term assets that require genuine investment. Pillar 5. Debt and risk as TOOLS. What the middle class fears, old money weaponizes. This next section tends to be the one that genuinely stops people, because what I'm about to tell you runs completely counter to almost everything mainstream financial culture has told you about debt and risk. Most middle-class financial advice says debt is bad. Avoid it. Cut up your cards. Pay off your mortgage early. And for consumer debt, debt used to buy things that depreciate, this is actually right. That kind of debt is a wealth killer. But old money families have an entirely different philosophy on debt. They use it as a lever for wealth amplification, not to consume, to acquire. Here's the math. Say you can acquire a commercial property worth $5 million. It generates $350,000 per year in rent and appreciates at 5% annually. You could pay cash, but that ties up $5 million of capital. Or you could borrow $4 million at 4% interest, costing you $160,000 per year, and deploy just $1 million of your own capital. Now your $1 million is generating a net $190,000 per year, a 19% cash-on-cash return on your actual deployed capital, plus the appreciation. Old money families understand this leverage intuitively. Their large debts are not signs of financial distress. They are signs of sophisticated asset acquisition. Their relationship with risk is equally counterintuitive. Middle-class thinking treats risk as something to fear. Old money treats risk as something to manage. Not because they're reckless, but because they have the time horizon, the diversification, and the financial resilience to absorb losses that would be catastrophic for the average person. They never put all their eggs in one basket, not even one sector of baskets. Real estate, equities, private businesses, art, bonds, cash, foreign assets. The goal is never maximum return. The goal is maximum survival so that the next generation inherits a living, growing organism. Your takeaway: begin categorizing debt into two buckets: Consuming debt bad, eliminate and investing debt, which managed carefully can be extraordinarily powerful, and start building a risk buffer, an emergency fund large enough to let you take calculated bets without those bets threatening your basic security. You cannot play offense until you have secured your defense. Pillar 6. Emotional discipline. The invisible superpower nobody talks about. We've covered time horizons, asset building, education, networks, debt and risk. But there's one pillar of the old money mindset that underpins all of the others, and it is the one that almost nobody ever talks about: emotional discipline around money. This is perhaps the most significant consistent difference between families that build generational wealth and families that don't. It isn't intelligence. It isn't luck. It isn't even strategy. It is the ability to completely remove emotion from financial decision-making and execute rational, patient, long-horizon choices even when everything around you is screaming to do the opposite. Think about 2008, markets collapsing, banks failing, pensions being destroyed overnight. The emotional response, the one that most people followed, was to panic. Sell everything. Get out. Protect what's left. Old money families who had been holding diversified, long-horizon portfolios did something almost incomprehensible to most people. They bought. They looked at assets that had dropped 40% and saw not catastrophe, but the sale of a generation. Because their time horizon was decades, not months. Because they had enough diversification that the loss on one position didn't threaten their survival. Because they had the emotional infrastructure to act rationally while everyone else was acting on fear. This emotional discipline extends to upswings as well. Old money families are notoriously unmoved by investment fads, hot markets, and speculative trends. When everyone else is piling into the latest asset bubble, old money is often quietly stepping back. Not because they're smarter, because they've been taught from childhood to distrust euphoria as much as they distrust panic. The middle class makes financial decisions in emotional states. Old money makes financial decisions in structural ones, with advisors, with frameworks, with rules established in advance specifically to override in-the-moment emotion. Your takeaway: build your financial rules before you need them when you're calm, rational, and thinking clearly. Write them down. What percentage triggers a rebalance? What's your hard rule on consumer debt? What level of emergency fund is non-negotiable? Pre-decided rules are worth 10 times more than in-the-moment willpower. Pillar 7. Legal architecture. They build walls around their wealth that most people don't know exist. Old money families don't just build wealth. They build structures around their wealth that protect it, preserve it, and make it extraordinarily difficult for any one generation to destroy. While the average person has a bank account, maybe a will if they've gotten around to it, and a vague plan to sort it out later, old money families have entire legal architectures in place, trusts that have been active for over 100 years, family offices that oversee investment strategy, legal structure, and intergenerational transfer, LLC structures and limited partnerships that legally separate family wealth from business risk. If a business venture fails, it fails within a contained legal entity. The core family wealth held in separate trust structures is completely untouched. Think about what this means in practice. The Rockefeller Family Trust, established in the early 20th century, still exists today. It has survived the Great Depression, World War II, multiple recessions, market crashes, and generational transfers. The wealth is protected not just by investment strategy, but by legal structure. By architecture that was deliberately designed to outlast any single generation's decisions. This structural protection is one of the most important pieces of the old money system, and it's something that many new money families catastrophically neglect. They build the wealth and leave it exposed. No trust, no proper legal separation, no plan. One lawsuit, one bad marriage, one reckless heir, and the entire structure can collapse. Your takeaway: even if you're just starting out, begin building the architecture now. Write a will today if you don't have one. You don't have a wealth plan, full stop. Look into a basic trust structure with an estate attorney. Open accounts in your children's names. Separate your business and personal finances with proper legal entities. The wealth it's designed to protect can still be growing. The structure should come first. Pillar 8. The stewardship shift. The most profound mindset reframe of all. We've arrived at the final pillar, and in some ways it's the most powerful of all, because it's not about strategy or structure. It's about a fundamental philosophical reframe of what it means to have wealth at all. Middle-class culture, and honestly much of new money culture, views wealth through the lens of personal ownership and consumption. The money is mine. I worked for it. I earned it. I deserve to enjoy it. This is completely understandable. It is a very human orientation toward money, and it is fundamentally incompatible with generational wealth. Old money families almost universally see themselves not as owners of their wealth but as stewards of it. The wealth isn't theirs to consume. They are temporarily the caretakers of something much larger than themselves, something that existed before they were born, and that is expected to exist long after they die. Their job is not to enjoy the wealth and pass down whatever's left. Their job is to grow the wealth, protect it, and hand a larger, better structured version of it to their children, who will then be stewards for their children. Think about how this reframe changes everything. If the money is yours to consume, every luxury purchase feels justified. You earned it. If the money is in your stewardship, every major expenditure requires justification. Is this the best use of the family's resources? The former mindset depletes wealth. The latter preserves and multiplies it. The Vanderbilts are a cautionary tale. Cornelius Vanderbilt built one of the greatest fortunes in American history, but the culture he left did not fully embrace stewardship. Several heirs became legendary spenders, building palatial estates, throwing extravagant parties, living at the outermost edge of luxury. Within 2 generations, much of the fortune had been consumed. By the 1970s, a Vanderbilt family reunion reportedly didn't include a single millionaire. The money lasted roughly 50 years. Compare that to families with a stewardship culture, who are still wealthy after 300. Your takeaway: journal this one question. If I saw myself as the steward of my family's financial future, not the owner of money I earned, what decisions would I make differently? The answers you write down are probably the most important financial lessons you'll ever put on paper. So here's the truth that old money has always known and almost nobody else is saying. You don't need to be born into old money to think like old money. The mindset is transferable. It just requires deliberate, intentional reprogramming, especially if you were raised in a system designed to make you think the opposite way. The families who have wealth today stretching back centuries, many of them didn't start with money. They started with a mindset, and then they built the money around it. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're the person who starts the dynasty. The one who makes the decisions, builds the architecture, installs the culture, and whose descendants look back generations from now and say, that's where it began. 8 pillars, 1 operating system. Think in centuries, not years. Build assets, not just income. Educate for power, not just employment. Build ecosystems, not just contacts. Use debt as a tool, not a trap. Develop emotional discipline as a financial skill. Build legal architecture around what you're creating. And see yourself as a steward, not just an owner. That's the real reason old money stays rich. Not luck, not inheritance, not a secret investment strategy, a way of thinking. And now you know it too. If this video added real value to how you see wealth and legacy, do me a favor and share it with one person who needs to hear this. Subscribe if you haven't already. We go this deep every single week on old money every day. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these 8 pillars hit hardest for you? I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.